Hello once again. We will start our final panel, but just as a reminder, after the panel, we will have our closing remarks, which is our political address, and then some final remarks by the Dean of the Baltic Defense College. But we are kicking off panel 6, Can Regional Coalitions Deter Russia's Hostile Intentions? And it will be moderated by a very familiar face to the Baltic Defense College, Colonel retired Dr. Zdzislaw Sliwa, who is assistant professor currently at the Institute of International and Security Studies at the University of Wrocław, but from 2016 to 2025, he was the Dean of the Baltic Defense College, and he also has been a professor at the Latvian National Defense University. Dr. Colonel Sliwa was educated in the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, at Polish and Chinese National Defense Universities, and he served as J3 head in K4 and J5 head in Polish operational commands. He was working in Polish PME institutions for several years, and throughout his distinguished career, he has published numerous books and papers related to international security, contributing extensively to the field of strategic studies. Sir, welcome back. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very nice. It was a very nice introduction. So great to be back in Tartu. I would say my second hometown. Okay, so the last panel, as you see, the title is very interesting, and I would say very nice to make a summary, because we are looking from also regional coalitions perspectives. So first of all, let me introduce our distinguished speakers. A very important fact is that we have a very nice combination. So we have politics, we have military, we have also academia. So definitely it will be very interesting, definitely, to listen. So first of all, let me start introduction with Mr. Kaimo, Kuusk, who is Permanent Secretary, Minister of Defense of Republic of Estonia, and graduated from University of Tartu, political scientist, and also University of Oslo, but he is also graduate of Civil Servant course at Baltic Defense College. So I would say also well connected with our nice institution. And for quite a few years, he was linked with 21 years with Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service. But later on, he was also Minister of Foreign Affairs, now Minister of Defense. But what is very important, he was Estonian ambassador in Lithuania, but also in Ukraine. In Ukraine, 22-23, this is the first year of Russian aggression against Ukraine, strongly supported Ukraine for a fight of independence and sovereignty. We have also with us Lieutenant General, retired, Stuart Skeates, also a very strong supporter of education at Baltic Defense College, and he was commissioned in Royal Regiment of Artillery, but lately he served as senior government civil servant as Director General for Strategic Operations, which is a very important function. Educated King's College London, Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. He was also commandant of that academy in the past, so also closely linked with academia. But what is very important, he spent some 20 years having experiences working in joint environment, international environment, within coalitions with US Marines, and also in NATO, in more than 10 countries, just to mention Afghanistan and Iraq. Those trouble, I would say, very complicated security environment. Next, we have with us Dr. Kai-Olaf Lang, sir, who is Senior Fellow at German Institute of International and Security Affairs. Very broad area of expertise, including Central and Eastern Europe, security, EU enlargement and implications, and also European neighborhood policy. And he worked also for a recognized think tank, Federal Institute of Eastern and International Studies. He is cooperating very closely with international academia, international institutions, Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, just among others. Very active person in that sense. And finally, Dr. Gustav Gressel. After serving as air defense officer in Austrian Defense Forces, he started his academic life. And currently he is senior lecturer and researcher at National Defense Academy of Austrian Armed Forces, so still continuing military field of expertise. He earned PhD in strategic studies at National University of Public Service in Budapest, a very interesting country. Areas of expertise: Eastern European studies, Russia, armed conflict, and of course, air defense and missile defense. I think it's your background is still somewhere in your mind, never forgotten. So let me just provide a short intro. As you see, the panel is by essence very interesting. So in Europe, there are of course NATO and EU as major security providers, but there are quite a few, many small groupings. Just to mention, Nordic Baltic 8, Nordic 5, yeah. We have E3 format, sometimes extended to E5. We have Weimar Triangle, Lublin Triangle, Three Seas initiative, a kind of Visegrad 4 with some internal issues at this point. And many organizations are overlapping each other regarding membership, capabilities, and but all of them, up to some extent, are contributing to European security. And those could be also supported by external contribution, just to mention JEF, Joint Expeditionary Force, again being coalition, it's not NATO as such, being a coalition. So gentlemen, based on your experiences, and also referring to the title of the panel, can regional coalitions deter Russia hostile intention? I think those intentions are among us and they will never disappear. If we like or we don't like, we need to just be prepared. So what is your assessment of decisions to merge efforts capabilities, but regionally, in the short and long-term perspective, and specifically related to NATO Eastern Flank security, facing a really existential threat? So what are the main drivers behind making coalitions? As coalitions are decided, assigned by political leadership, I will ask Ambassador to refer to that important area of concern.
Thank you very much. Yeah, beyond everything, I also worked 21 years in foreign intelligence. Yes. And as I'm saying, the damage is done after all those years. The damage is irreversible. Let me stress the importance of deterrence. Roughly a month ago, I gave an interview for a Postimees. That's one of the major news outlets in Estonia. And the journalist asked me, in the future, whether Estonia should become a Nordic Israel. And I answered that no way. We should be Nordic Estonia. Because beyond everything what Israel does right, there's one thing which doesn't fit us at all. Israel regularly fails in deterrence. They are forced to fight the wars in average after every 7 to 10 years, maybe even more often. And that's not the model we want to follow. They are successful more or less in fighting, but the casualties which can fit for 10 million people, maybe not so good for 1.3 million people. So for us, deterrence is a key. And for that, we are investing since this January more than 5% of GDP into our defense. I'm calling it even investing into our own freedom. That's first pillar of our security. Starting from intel, early warning, building the division, enhancing the voluntary Kaitseliitti Defense League, deep strike capabilities, Baltic Defense Line, layer air defense, everything is inside that. The second pillar is acting together with allies. Exactly. 1939, we thought that we are hiding ourselves from history, declared ourselves neutral with a neighbor like that. It's not working. And we found ourselves to be occupied for more than 4 rough decades. And living under Russian peace, you don't want to experience it, the ones who haven't done it. we got our independence back and then we declared that never again alone.
Yeah.
So that's why we are part of the two international organizations which I'm saying currently are able to fulfill the core tasks. It's European Union and it's NATO. Those two organizations are the only ones, in my opinion, which are fulfilling the core tasks. Sorry, my fellow diplomats or colleagues in foreign ministry, United Nations is not fulfilling its core task. Sending somewhere one column of humanitarian aid is not the core task of United Nations. The core task is to avoid war or stop the war. It's not capable to do that. So NATO, EU, what you also mentioned, are the strongest one, and we are member of that. At the same time, we need to bolster our security with the ones who are closest to us.
Yeah.
And that's the supplementary work we are doing and which need to be done. You mentioned 3B, it's the 3 Baltics. In defense-wise, between the defense forces, but also, well, in cooperation of the intelligence services, we take 3 Baltics as one operational area. So you can call it Schengen of intel or Schengen of the defense forces, which every citizen can understand what the Schengen means, especially when you put it on pause. When it's not functioning, you understand how good the Schengen area actually is. So we need to guarantee the military mobility for ourselves inside our own region. That's mainly land-wise with 3 Baltics, but also crucial thing is Poland for us. Whether you call it Suwalki Gap or corridor or possibility, I call it possibility. That's also crucial for us. With Nordics, Nordic Baltic 8, I as ambassador when I was in Kiev, I exploited this tool very, very much, because it's really, we have so much similarities, see between us, but also that's a similarity for us. I'm super happy Sweden and Finland joined NATO because of Estonia, but also because of Finland and Sweden as well, because it's very useful for them as well. One thing what we learned, and it's good if you learn from mini crises as well, in September 19, when 3 Russian planes intervened Estonian airspace, we had it under control. Italians who are in Ämari, close to Tallinn, sent up in the air F-35s at the same moment when Russians raised their planes in Pesovets. Italian, French made, but Italian operated some air defense system, long-range one, followed the Russian planes already, well, beyond the horizon.
Right.
Finns took off their 2 fighter planes, Swedes took off their fighter planes. The one thing what we learned, what we need to improve, and the work is going on at the moment, is that when Russians turned into our airspace, gentlemen from Finland didn't follow them, because polite persons are not violating neighbors' airspace. Well, we learned that it hasn't been fixed in our and Finns legislation. So we are working now with that, and it will be not a problem next times. That's why, as our first president, when we got independence back, said it very well, that today's He was very blunt. Today's shit is your tomorrow's fertilizer. Well, if there's something wrong, use it as a fertilizer to make it better. So that's why those local alliances, local cooperation formats are really, really important. Can they replace? No way. NATO, EU, no way. Because then we need a nuclear weapons inside our region. And don't take it as a call for that at the moment. We have in Estonia UK troops, French troops, US. All three alliance members who has nukes. And against Russia, it's the ultimate deterrence. What you need. War in Ukraine has shown what happens if you refuse nukes and hope that treaties what Russia have signed will be in force after a couple of weeks. The signature was put there. Never trust Moscow. So with a neighbor like that, you need different kind of tools in your toolbox.
Thank you very much. Of course, Budapest Memorandum was mentioned already quite a few times, and also Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but also Poland lost independence for some years in the past, and it will never happen again. And Russia should also think about that. It will be not free ticket to be taken. Okay, so let me refer to General, sir. So you, as I mentioned, you have really extensive experiences working within coalition, joint environment, international environment, as military, but also senior government officials, so merging both politics and military, because those two are always related this way or another. And coalitions are not NATO and EU as such. However, they are supplementing in some specific domains. Do you see coalitions as force multipliers, deterring aggression, but also enhancing resilience, which is very important, not only in military domains, sir?
Thank you, Zdzislaw. And agree all that Kaimo said, as you might expect. I mean, just for those of you who don't know, I was responsible for establishing the Joint Expeditionary Force, which started back in 2015. So, you know, not surprisingly, I would answer yes to this particular question, just to get set up. That's me. I'm done. Thank you. No, but in all seriousness. So coalitions play a hugely vital part to reinforcing the institutions which have been and will continue to guarantee our security into the future. And I think I'll just sort of start off really by sort of, you know, landing a couple of ideas. But the area that I really wanted to sort of focus on, which is the area that I don't think our current coalitions, and they are, I would just sort of observe, a bit of a burgeoning community, and I think there's an issue there. But it's an area where those current coalitions are not yet addressing, and that's principally in the financial, the economic, and the industrial space. And that is very, very directly related to how you deter Russia, because as we've seen with the way that Russia is fighting in Ukraine, how they have told us for many years that they would fight, they are in it for the long war, because they know that they can outlast us. So our ability to use small, larger, and ultimately the NATO alliance to generate deterrence by production, as Rafe Woodis called it yesterday, is, I think, going to be hugely important. So I think, you know, we've got to remind ourselves what deterrence is all about. It's about capability plus intent, which has got to be communicated. And really, I think what lies underneath that, which is the second point, is that it is a test of our national will, because by trying to avoid warfare, that is as much a test of national will as we are seeing day to day on the battlefields in Ukraine. And so if you accept the fact that a coalition is an ad hoc grouping of states who are brought together by an international agreement for a very specific foreign or defense policy purpose, Then you can see where, organisations like the Joint Expeditionary Force. I was also responsible for the bilateral arrangement we had with France, the what's now called the Combined Joint Force. You can see absolutely where they fit in. And in the early days of the JEF, again, we ought not to forget that one of the reasons why it was created was on the back of the Wales summit in 2014, where NATO allies were encouraged to set up these sort of smaller groupings. And we were encouraged to do it in three ways: develop the existing frameworks led by the United Kingdom, Germany and Italy, and the UK lent into that through the Joint Expeditionary Force. Develop new regional frameworks, and we have seen many of those. I mean, I suspect we'll come on to talk about the NB8, as I think it's now being called, which strikes me as a very good idea indeed. There have been similar groupings around the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and so on and so forth. And the third was to develop thematic frameworks, and many of that gave birth to many of these centres of excellence we see, and I think led to a more comfortable discussion around NATO on how you specialise headquarters, both for regional problem sets, we now call them regional plans, and also around domains and environments, which is all a good thing. The new issue, however, as we heard yesterday on several of the panels, and as we are living through at the moment, is that we are now, by the United States, as Europeans, being encouraged to do more. And obviously we'll include Canada and Iceland in that as well. So there is a requirement for us to think through what, in the new era, coalitions should sort of look like and do. But I think the area where that was back in the minds of those who drafted the agenda and led some of the discussions during the Wales summit in 2014 was coalitions based on things like capability, not necessarily platforms, but the production of munitions, the production of intelligence, the coping with disinformation, and so on and so forth. Because the problems that coalitions are trying to resolve haven't really changed. I think they've evolved. So since 2015, one of the principles behind the Joint Expeditionary Force was back then to buy out some of the latency and potential decision delay that the NAC might display in answer to a hostile effect. And it gave options, really important for commanders and leaders, political leaders at the time. It gave options which were short of an Article 5 declaration. Now, a lot has happened in the last 10, 11 years or so. And if you look at, the deterrence and defence of the Euro-Atlantic area, the new regional plans, and in particular, the genesis of the military alert system, we have come a very long way since then. Some would say that it means that design principle of the JEF is no longer relevant. I would say probably not yet. And in any case, you would want to have as many options and to give your leaders as many options as possible, even if we were furiously agreeing on what a hostile act looked like. The sort of second reason, obviously, is resilience. And again, we've come a long way, but nowhere near far enough. And a lot of what we were being encouraged to do and have done to an extent has been about preparing ourselves better for conflict, both in terms of specialization of various themes and environments. And we have certainly improved our ability, to understand our adversary back from the front line. And, you must remember that obviously of the 32 allies, the majority, are not proximate to the threat, and that's an issue. But actually, I think, we've all been encouraged to think through and view Russia in a similar way, not exactly the same way yet, but in a very much similar way to the way you do here in the Baltic states. And the third area, really, that we were asked to look at was the sort of industrial capability and financial aspects. And again, the JEF was, one of the tracks of the JEF was always supposed to be closer collaboration on capability. And there have been attempts at it, but it really hasn't happened. It hasn't happened for, I think, a number of reasons. The first one of those is investment. There just hasn't been the level of investment, that's been even across all GEF nations. And, I call out my own nation as being, one of the worst offenders in that particular issue. But also, as I'll come on to sort of mention very briefly in a moment, it's largely because we have not yet worked out how to lead ourselves into a position where we have energized the supply side and rationalized the demand side. Because we are in a, it's great if you're a Keynesian free market economist, because that's where we are at the moment. It's highly competitive, the defense industrial space at the moment, but it is reaching a point, and it will reach a point, I think, fairly quickly, where that competition will become self-defeating and do us more harm than good. So let's very quickly look at the supply side. SAFE, a fantastic initiative, a really, really important initiative, and underlines, a lot of what Kaimo was saying about the importance of the EU. And it has given many governments, including, some of those governments represented here, to really pitch for a 5% GDP threshold, and in some cases exceed it. And that is absolutely fantastic. And having that underlying insurance mechanism is incredibly important. But it's not just about, taxpayers' hard-earned cash. It is also about how we liberate and mobilize private capital. So you've got the Defence, Security and Resilience Bank, which has been a long time in the design and hopefully will be launched at some stage this year. There's the Rearmament Bank, I think it's called, which is a similar sort of initiative, slightly more reliant on US money than the DSRB. What you have got there are collections of countries and governments who are committed to putting skin in the game, to putting substantial amounts of capital, to make borrowing available at AAA rated standards. And that automatically is a coalition of nations. It's a group which can benefit the industries and the economies of those nations who are part of it. And it encourages more to come online. Where I think there is the potential for a bit more is on the private capital side. And, for those of you who, deal with defense industry on a routine basis, you would probably experience lots of venture capitalists, encouraging investment or proposing investment in startups, small and medium enterprises, and so on and so forth. That capitalist model is again fine, and there are plenty of investment organizations which are now prepared to commit, including here in the Baltic states. There are some countries where, for example, pension funds do tend to be the wealthier of the investment mechanisms, still have policies partly based on, environmental, social considerations and so forth, which prevent them from doing it. They'll follow the money eventually, because that's, where the growth area is. And again, I think, and for due transparency, I'm helping an investment fund get up and running. And the idea of that is we base it around the E3, France, Germany, and the UK. And again, you have another sort of small coalition there who can then, protect, for example, the intellectual property of those organizations, startups, which are designing some really exciting and interesting capability, some of which is headed to Ukraine, some of which is drawn from Ukraine, and that will service us very well. But there's a number of buts here. And the biggest but is that if you are going to attract investment, whether that be public investment from governments or private investment through private capital, the market has got to be right. And at the moment, as I mentioned, it is too fractured, it is too competitive, and frankly, it is too small. And so the challenge really, I think, for coalitions going forward is going to be, and this is a brave call, it's going to be for governments to be prepared to coalesce their equipment types, their platforms, and so on and so forth, to minimise the number of different factories, supply chains, and so on and so forth. And Ukraine has been living with this. They've done an amazing job in coping with the panoply of equipment that they've been given. You know, it's like someone's sort of taken a Lego factory and shaken it up and said, get on with it. But they've done just an amazing job at sorting it all out. But you wouldn't want to do that by design. Now, that's not to say that we only want one tank, one infantry fighting vehicle, one fighter, one ship in the whole of NATO, but commonality of parts and standardization is key. And for those of us who served during the last Cold War, our lives were ruled by standard NATO agreements, STANAGs. You know, that's where the 155, caliber shell came from. It's why tanks had to be a certain width so that they could fit through so that they could get on the back of a German railway loader, and secondly, so they could fit through the tunnels and have trains going both ways. I mean, things like that, you know, we have lost the knack of doing it, and, you know, we need to very much get back into that. I'll pause there, but my final word is that taking those sorts of actions pays downstream dividends, and it's the sort of thing in the long war scenario which I think that Russia will take notice of.
Yeah, so very important point, military industry. So finally, EU is also contributing to that military domain. And if we have such military industry here in place, it's better than to have some faraway allies, maybe. Just a comment, so we need to have it. And of course, Jeff, NATO and EU are based on consensus. So probably there will be never consensus in we have some vetoes for some simple matters. Okay, let me ask Mr. Lang. Just lately, I was watching also your interview on Polish TV, by the way, and you are talking about new security cooperation opportunities, also coalitions. And also, you mentioned the shift in German policy, enhancing security and solidarity, but you touch it in much broader sense, which is definitely referring to what we need to talk about today, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very good idea to talk about this important issue in the framework of this conference, so congratulations to the organizers. Let me try to share with you a couple of, let's call it, structuring observations from an analytical point of view in the field of foreign security policy on our topic. And as the Honorable Chairman mentioned at the very beginning, there is a sort of, I would say, a proliferation and a mushrooming of these groupings, coalitions. And I think this results mainly from three tendencies. The first one is a sort of regionalization of security in Europe. We are very often talking about the eastern flank of NATO, but in my opinion, there are different flanks. So flankism is always implying the question, where is this flank? Where is the eastern flank? Does it stretch from Finland to Turkey? Is Turkey a country of the eastern flank? Or is it the B9, the Bucharest 9 countries? So, or is it something like, do we have a northeastern flank or a southeastern theater and then the western Black Sea and so on and so forth? So regionalization with everything which goes along with it. Second, we are of course observing that security in Europe is a multi-level game. So of course we have the overarching institutions, EU and NATO, it was mentioned at various occasions. We have the national states, the member states of NATO and EU with their efforts, but we also have a newly emerging meso level. And I think it's where these coalitions and groupings fit in. And then the third factor, the third driver, I think, is what is often called the new sense of urgency, because we also have functional groupings. They're not necessarily confined to a certain area on the map, but they are emerging around capabilities, around issues and challenges. So this is kind of the general observation at the beginning. I would like to tackle three more palpable questions. And that's talking about, what are we talking about? The second one would be, what is the added value and what are the functions of these groupings and coalitions? And third, and I think this is the most important one, As I'm a think tank person, in former times, governments had questions and they expected answers from think tanks. And now I think the task for think tanks is not to produce answers, but to produce the right questions. So what are the open questions with the groupings? So we'll just run quickly through these three areas. So what are we talking about? I think there is a huge diversity of these coalitions. And I would say there are three types of these groupings with some simplification. There are, of course, the capability coalitions, drone coalition, tank coalition, trying to fill certain gaps in a speedy way. Second, I think we have diplomatic pressure groups. The Nordic Baltic 8 are an instructive example for like-minded countries. But if you look at platforms, groupings like E5, Weimar Triangle Plus, call it as you like, they're not necessarily like-minded, but for other reasons, they have tried to bind together. And then the third category, I think, these are support groups, bridging, for example, the relations of EU, of NATO, from inside the alliance and the community to Ukraine and other important partners. Now, what these groupings are not, they're not alliances, at least not yet. What we, by the way, should not forget, there is not only a proliferation of unilateral formats, there is also a proliferation of bilateral security treaties in Europe. UK, France, Franco-German treaty, Treaty of Nancy between France and Poland, but there are dozens and dozens of these treaties. Some are empty shells, some are very substantial, and some entail solidarity and security clauses. So what we might think about in the future, will there be a sort of mutual assistance and solidarity clause in the Nordic-Baltic, among Nordic-Baltic 8 countries? But for the time being, they are not alliances, maybe they are defense clusters. Maybe that would be a notion, or defense clusters in the making. And we should not forget, formally, most of these groups, I think all of them, are outside of the NATO and EU framework, even though the participating states are members of EU and NATO. So in the EU guys here know there's PESCO, so it's a form of enhanced cooperation in the field of defense. That's inserted in the framework of the EU treaties. But for the time being, these groupings are decoupled. Second, my second area. So what is the added value of these groupings? I would very briefly hint at four specific points. First, of course, they have these groups are less formal than NATO or the EU, so they can create a sort of political rapid reaction. They can be first movers, or at least early movers. They don't have to grapple with bureaucracies and with procedures very often. Second, they can, of course, specialize in specific needs and specific capabilities which are necessary, for example, in certain regions. They can take into account regional peculiarities. A couple of days ago, the Nordic Baltic 8 countries, including Poland, including Germany, signed a memorandum of understanding on the evacuation of population. So this is not a coalition yet, but it is a sort of regional cooperation of adjacent countries. Third, political lobbying is a function and an added value of these regional groups. I would say the Nordic Baltic 8 could be something like a coalition of resolve, leading by example. Then we have like something like E5 or E6, the heavyweights in Europe. They might be something I have a leadership role. And finally, of course, the external dimension, the bridging function with Ukraine I mentioned, but also E3 in the context of Iran and other international crises. To conclude, and that would be my final and third area, the open questions that I just be very compact. Challenges and open questions. Now, where's the steering committee? So this is an emerging patchwork of these regional and functional coalitions. And will this lead to more unity, or will this drive the alliance and the European Union apart? Maybe we will need a sort of European Security Council in the future in order to integrate it. Second open question, I will stop. Will this lead to different zones of solidarity and security in Europe? More highly integrated regions and less highly integrated regions. What does this mean for the unity? And last point, will this be, in the long run, will these coalitions be more embedded in NATO, in the European Union? Will they be loosely coupled, or will they be apart? Sorry for being too long.
Thank you very much. So with coalition, we have sometimes the problem that they have better and worse period of cooperation, just to mention Visegrad 4 or Weimar Triangle. Political entities are changing, and sometimes coalitions are more and less effective. So I will refer to Dr. Gressel. You did quite a lot of research about something which was already partially mentioned, like defense plans, regional cooperation. Do you think that defense plans are really ongoing in proper speed, and are they focused enough? Because you did research, so you know it quite well. But maybe in 5 minutes I will interrupt you for a second, but go ahead, sir.
Okay, yeah, so my involvement with the defense plan, you would probably guess why is there an Austrian talking up there? But I've been working in Berlin from 2014 to 2024 at the European Council on Foreign Relations, and one of our sort of core tasks was to push down the necessity for NATO restarting regional defense planning and getting the Germans, especially after 2014, on board of that. And that was a hard task. I got a lot of bad comments from a certain chancellor that he doesn't need suggestions from any Austrians about German defense plans, so I should bring my own country in order, which I did, so I got back. But basically, why I think sort of defense planning and defense plans and NATO's regional defense plans will be a driver for regional cooperation. Well, all the consultation groups we discussed before, they emerged at a time where we were talking about wars of ambition. And most of the European groupings came from, like the E3 on Iran, came from certain foreign policy ambitions that some countries had. But the problem with ambitions, of course, is that Europeans, when it comes to wars of ambition, we mark our ambition, and then when the day comes where they actually sort of should be realized, we discover that actually no, we're not so much interested in living up to our own ambitions. With the issue of deterring Russia, this is not an ambition; it's a necessity, and it's quite clear for pretty any European country that is an urgent necessity. What is the threat on this? And that is also a discussion that has evolved and then has led to the evolvement of regional groupings. We heard, of course, since 2014 up until 2022, we heard a lot about discussion about so-called hybrid attacks. So basically attacks that happen below the threshold of Article 5. Well, these things happen all the time. The problem for Moscow is that below Article 5 attacks do not fulfill the strategic aim Moscow has, is unraveling the European security order and basically pushing NATO and EU into self-collapse. this is a political goal that the Kremlin has that is hardly achievable by just below Article 5 operations. Then a lot of talk has been cooked up about...
Gustav, may I just stop you for a second? General must leave as another appointment. Do you want to say something?
I was really hoping to say that quietly, Zdzislaw. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir, for your contribution, sir. Please continue.
Like in Germany, we have books being written about, small targeted Russian aggression against the NATO membership, and that basically puts up political conundrums, and NATO might break apart on these. The problem, of course, or the weakness, I think a lot of the discussions have on this kind of limited Article 5 threshold scenarios is that they underestimate local reaction capacity. And, the Baltic countries are not unarmed. They're small, but they're armed and they're organized. And other countries like Poland, like Finland, of course, they are smaller than Russia, but they're organized and they're armed. And I would include actually robust police forces into these primary reaction forces as well. They have a certain capability. The second thing is when I look at the Russian army and how it behaves in Ukraine, I just don't see the kind of professionalism and small tactical proficiency to pull off a targeted small operation. For this, you need effective professional troops. Russian infantry assaults, Russian infiltration assaults are the country of that. What Russia has is mass and firepower. And we've been talking about mass yesterday and Russia as a mass army, but it's also a firepower-centric army. And that firepower-centric army has gained a lot during basically copying the Ukrainian drone revolution and applying on its own. We're talking about an army that is on average launching 160 long-range attack drones per day, and that on average launches 4,000 FPV drones per day against Ukrainian lines. And in our own sort of planning for a defense on that, an army that in any scenario unleashes the firepower as key element of its competitive advantage to get either the political results it deserves, or, which I think is the most likely one, to get out of an escalation it has started on assumptions that were flawed and tries to escalate itself out without losing face, is something that we need to take into account. And because of this firepower, because of the mass, all countries, even in a limited scenario, because it will escalate very quickly, need to have access to reserves. We need to reinforce local defenses. We need to strengthen local reaction capabilities relatively quickly. Under current conditions, one single brigade needs 500 new soldiers per month just to stay operationally. If you think that through for 1 year of war, and how many brigades our plans foresee to be present, just think of the reserve capability you need to generate new forces, to train them, to mobilize them, etc. That is not a small task. Now, of course, if we look into our current regional defense plans, basically they all foresee that US forces will come to our rescue or will provide a lot of these reserve functions to add up and to come in. The problem is, as we also discussed yesterday, there is a declining appetite in Washington to provide them. Of course, this has been reinforced by the Trump administration and the policy, but of course it's a longer-term trend. And even if the Democrats would reclaim the White House and sort of transatlantic relations politically would get back to normal, the modernization of the People's Liberation Army will not slow down. And the demands for forces in case of a Pacific escalation in the Pacific will, irrespective of who occupies the White House, grow. So this is a thing that will come onto our desk, and it is at our desk. Now it's, of course, there's no more political urgency to it, but otherwise it would come in a more mannered way, but it would come anyway. And we basically see the necessity then to have local European to fill this reserve function and to deeper plan and cooperate with those states that are the recipients of our reserve forces, where we send, especially now, of course, I have my German hat on again, where the countries where the Bundeswehr would go if push comes to shove, for Germany and for other countries as well. And this has to be regional, because there is no single European state that can fill this sort of function that US have. We just don't have any member state that is singularly large enough and that is politically accepted enough to fill the role. And this is why we see this emergence of local coalitions and a deepening. The Nordic Baltic Defense Cooperation, these are, I think, the role model. The Nordic Nordefco is the deepest regional defense integration you can see in the alliance. The common procurement you see between these armies is one of the best and underestimated factors for military cooperation and deterrence. Another lesson, we talked a lot about the drone lessons of Ukraine, but another lessons Ukrainians have is that it's really a pain in the butt if you have to operate forces with vehicles and munitions from different countries that provided them with different logistical chains, with different enterprises servicing. It is not what you want to end up with. The problem is, if NATO goes to war the way we are, we will end up with this, especially if a lot of our brigades are shot to pieces and need to be reassembled and mixed and mingled. We will end up being Ukrainian very quickly on that.
Okay.
And we see also an emergence in the south. So, for example, the French presence in Romania. I follow, of course, due to my ECFR affiliation, also a lot the situation in Moldova, and it's not much sung over this, and there's not much in the press. But, for example, France, because also its presence in Romania has been very helpful for Moldova for certain issues, starting from election integrity down to, of course, security sector reform, military officers training, etc. And you see this growing French role in sort of on the southern part of the eastern flank that will continue. The center is a bit of sort of the problematic one. You would think, of course, Poland and Germany are natural allies. They have actually armed forces that come from a very similar culture as continental land warfare-based armed forces. But of course, you have political problems or disturbances along the way. Basically, both Poland and Germany compete for attention in Washington. They compete for US forces on the ground. You have the historical issues. You have domestic political hiccups. You have some in Berlin. You have disappointment that sort of the assistance to Ukraine is going down in Warsaw. In Warsaw, you have disappointment that sort of the German role, especially on addressing some historic grievances, is just ignoring it. So this is, while on paper, of course, there would be a lot of chances for cooperating. In practice, we see pretty little, and procurement, there's defense industrial competition between countries. There's quite extensively. The other limit is, of course, nuclear deterrence to regional coalitions. Yes, there are now talks between French and German and other allies. But just judging from Berlin, of course, while these talks are good and necessary, one needs to remind of the difficulties of Germany sort of hanging into or agreeing with France to sign up to nuclear deterrence or shared nuclear deterrence. NATO nuclear deterrence is very elaborated, resting on the US arsenal, sort of flexible response, a very symmetric way of escalating that leaves off-ramps, that commands rather for prudency. If you are a minimal deterror like France, you have to be offensive in your communication because you have to convince the other party that you're crazy enough to push the button if they cross the red lines. And part of the rhetoric Macron is having, the harsh rhetoric, is exactly to underpin that and to confirm the French role in their nuclear deterrence posture. A German politician signing up to that would have domestic problems.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are currently in the region which is very nicely cooperating together, just to mention Baltic Defense College, contributing to professional education, not only here in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but much broader. I would also encourage to read a statement from December last year from Baltic Council, which is really good example of really comprehensive approach to all domains of security. And also in the documents, it's clearly stated that those three nations are taking responsibility for safeguarding NATO and EU eastern border. So this is a really strong statement. So I have just a quick question. Just lately, which was partially mentioned by Dr. Lang, in January we had a letter from German Minister of Finance, and he was inviting some nations like French, Poland, Spain, Italy, Netherlands to work closer together. So to work closer together. It was also mentioned in the context like E3. Can we discuss in the future about Europe of dual speed or multi-speed Europe? Because coalitions are also different in nature regarding capabilities, power, political power. So
for me,
or maybe you will also.
I'm not a part of any of those you mentioned. I can imagine. No, the dual speed, I think it's not a solution. To mobilize someone is exactly to show example for others. So you can form a critical mass to make something move. And then the others will follow. It's in a collective, in an organization of people, but it's also, it applies for the organization of states as well, easily. So I can read this call like that. Well, be it, let's take frozen assets in Belgium, majority of them into use. So for that, you need to put pressure, Brussels, as the capital of Belgium. So you are forming like-minded countries firsthand, and hoping to convince the one you want to convince. So that's how I read it.
Coalition matters. So if you want to just short comment toward it.
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting initiative because it's the six biggest economies of the European Union, but basically it's an initiative from Minister of Finance. And one of the four priority areas of this initiative is also defense and security.
Yes.
And all the things, also the general mentioned.
Economy.
So, which means that kind of in the realm of finance and economy, you see a sort of new opening for all these issues. De facto, I could say it's an initiative of 5+1, because usually remember the times of the financial crisis when also these debates about differentiated integration, deepening, multi-speed Europe, internal circles came up. That was usually the Eurozone. Now, 5+1, there's one country which is not part of the Eurozone, Poland. So I think from the point of view of Germany and also others, it's a signal of inclusiveness. To have an important country from Central Eastern Europe, from the eastern flank of EU, so to say, also as part of this initiative. I think anyway, in terms of your question, is this the start of a new kind of multi-speed Europe? I'm very cautious. Okay. Germany has always been the standard bearer for good reasons of the unity of the EU 27, even though sometimes it's very difficult. Formally, it's not so easy. I don't want to dive too much into the nitty-gritty of enhanced cooperation of EU, but there are some kind of legal thresholds. So this should not endanger the cohesion of the single market and so on and so forth. But I think it's an important signal that defense and security is not only for foreign ministers and ministers of defense, but that it is a broader economic dimension.
Okay.
Well, we witness an enormous amount of ad hocism in Europe. especially in the European Union, because we have one member state that is blocking a lot, and that's Hungary. And I think that this kind of atomism has found the end of its viability, because if we don't address the elephant in the room, that is Viktor Orban, and if we don't think about Article 7 at some point in time, it just will drive the whole organization nuts, and it will provide a horrible example for other countries. Looking at my own, we might in 2029 get a right-wing government by the FPÖ. The EU needs to reintroduce this sort of disciplinary elements. Otherwise, it will just get out of hand, and we can't plug the holes with atomism anymore.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So I will ask one question, which is from our audience, but next I will open questions from all of you, so be ready to ask. And one question is very interesting because it is talking about Israel, which is about adopting Israeli successful defense technological ecosystem, and also should we consider adopting the Israeli approach to respond effectively to aggressions like Russia in Nordic Baltics? Could you?
Well, I think it's inspired my opening remarks.
Probably.
I totally agree that there are things we can learn from Israel. One is how smart they are to get money from US. The second, how smart they are to invent and implement new technologies into their armed forces. They're really skillful in that, absolutely. The anti-ballistic capabilities, there are not many nations in the world who are better than them, or on the same level at least. How they have built up the reserve army, that's how we are learning what they are doing, how they value the reservists, how they have built up the conscripts as well. But I still say that the deterrence part, despite of everything like that, is not working. Do they have crazier neighbor than we have? Okay, that's another debate, but the deterrence has not worked. Let's see how the current operation, which tomorrow will be 1 week fulfilled, will help them in that.
I mean, with all the respect to the Israeli Defense Forces, and you said that, and also integrating defense industry with armed forces and have a very short loop of service, that's also something we can learn from the Israelis. But the fundamental dilemma and why Israel is acting preemptively and very aggressively is because they don't want Iran to become the kind of secure nuclear power that from there opens all gray zone conflicts against them. That's why they are attacking all the time. Our problem is that Russia already is a nuclear power and opens all gray zone nonsense against us. So we are kind of past the situation that Israel tries to avoid. And that's why all comparisons fail, because we are in totally different strategic environments. Mm-hmm. I can understand the Israelis why they don't want to have Iran becoming a neutral power. We see that, but you know, with us it's done.
Didn't the Israeli Prime Minister recently say that Israel has to be turned into Sparta? That brings me to this idea, the kind of, who was it, Lycurgus from Sparta, who said the city that is well fortified has not a wall of bricks, but a wall of men. So what you, Kaimo, said, kind of the idea of the soft factors, we should also in a regional context, this kind of the concepts we were discussing also yesterday and today, very often comprehensive defense, civil protection, the cohesion of the Nordic Baltic 8, and I think this is, I agree with what Gustav said, maybe the most advanced of these regional groupings, but it's also a very unique constellation which you probably cannot transfer to other parts of Europe. And this also depends on similar strategic culture, on similar attitudes in society and so on. That's why it also would be very difficult, also for other reasons, to include other bigger countries of the region into this well-working thing. So we should not forget this kind of the integration of the soft and the hard issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you very much. So I guess we are open to some questions from audience. So if we could have 2 or 3 questions together, which will allow us to have more comprehensive answers. So please address to speaker or just more general, sir.
Good afternoon, Roman Kovalchuk, Belarusian Christian Democracy. Belarusian armed forces are not the same currently as they were in the beginning of full-scale Russian aggression. Currently they are in a mode of constant drills, maneuvers, troops redeployments across the country. Lukashenko's regime possesses also offensive capabilities like Polonez launchers, Iskander, and most recently Oreshnik. Deployed in Belarus. On the side of democratic community, we raise voices, most recently by the head of Defense and National Security in Transition Cabinet, and recently released from prison in Minsk, Colonel Mykola Statkevich, said Europe may rise a brigade or a corps from Belarusian diaspora and deploy in Poland and in Ukraine. So the question is to anyone willing to respond, do you see it as additional risk of escalation or as an additional instrument of deterrence if we are able to raise a brigade or a division from Belarusians in exile? Thanks. In Europe.
Very much. Any more questions at this point? Okay, so of course we have a Russia-Belarus Union, we have Collective Security Organization, we have Shanghai Cooperation Organization, so Russia, they have also some, let's say, coalitions, sir. So who would like to address that question regarding Belarus?
Well, I can. I mean, there is in Ukraine you have Belarusian battalions. At the beginning of the war, recruitment was higher. Now, of course, after 4 years, a lot of these formations took heavy casualties. I mean, generally, the issue of sort of having a foreign legion in other countries where you recruit citizens of other countries is something that is legally possible only in very few countries, and neither Poland nor Germany at the time considered that. But yes, at the end of the day, it is of course a game. The thing with the Russian integration, I mean, we need to be careful with Russian and Belarusian leadership drumbeat, like we have nuclear weapons in Belarus now, but actually before that you had tactical nuclear weapons in the proximity of Belgorod, so it didn't move practically a lot. What Russia wants us to believe is that sort of this is a new dimension that needs to be negotiated away, and what Russia constantly offers is the withdrawal of US nuclear weapons from Europe in return for the withdrawal of Russian nuclear weapons from Belarus, and that of course would be a really bad deal. And I just hope that these kind of deals do not catch the attention in Washington.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Well, I agree what you just said, and I will continue from that. The tactical nukes has been in Kaliningrad or Königsberg as well, actually. So geographically wise, nothing changed for us, and we are not falling into that trap which Russia, together with Minsk, tries to quite regularly put us. That hey, be afraid, or otherwise we will do something. Well, we should keep calm, and keeping Belarusian troops in training mode. I think that's the only way what Lukashenko can do to not somehow lose control of those units, actually. So it's like being on a ship when there's no wind and you don't have engine century ago. You need to give your crew something to do. Or when the large-scale war started and I was in Kiev in our Estonian embassy, you need to give your crew something to do. Otherwise, they go crazy. And I think Lukashenko don't trust his own militaries as well, actually. So keep them training. Plus, that's also showing to Moscow that, oh, we are doing something kind of against Ukraine, but they are definitely afraid of crossing the border because Ukrainian troops are so good that the Lukashenko has the option only to take the second place, and in war the second place means not silver medal but losing. Legion in Poland, well, it's really a difficult one. We are dealing with our legislation to give us opportunity and possibility, if needed, to incorporate other citizens also into our own defense forces. But we are not foreseeing in such a scale. Plus, yeah, there are opportunities currently as well to do that.
Mm-hmm. So, another questions? If not, I will read a question from audience. So, this is about deterring Russia. How, in the end, can it be measured that deterrence is working? Are regional coalition in any sense, deterring Russia?
Well, it's if it's calm outside, sun is shining, foreign airplanes are not flying, then everything is fine. Then that's how you're measuring it, actually.
Yeah, how to measure it, yeah.
Yeah, well.
So far, so good.
Well, in theory, yes, because we are not at war yet. However, what deters Russia right now, what binds Russia right now, is they're in the war in Ukraine. And Ukrainians are defending the calmness we are enjoying. And that should be, we should remember this every day, and we should not go this time to waste. And first of all, support the Ukrainians, but second, also to really progress beyond papers and conferences to ramp up our military capability to defend ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we will see it when the war in Ukraine will be over. I think it will be very difficult to measure or to establish the causality. What has helped to establish a deterrence? If it was NATO, if it is national efforts, if it is the regional constellations, probably it is everything of that.
Exactly.
But probably it is a good thing to have in the areas of heightened sensitivity and heightened vigilance, also an increased deterrence posture. And I think here this added value, so to say, NATO plus, can come from these regional cooperations. What I think will be important is to involve others. And when the Lithuanian brigade is a very kind of instructive example how it should be, I think. Yeah, so that it is not that NB8 or Baltic efforts are not detached, but that they have kind of in their efforts for regional deepening, so to say, a sort of guarantee that some of the European key allies is in sight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead. Our colleague from Israel, for sure. Great to see you.
Almost, this is Canada, actually.
Oh, excuse me. We are similar.
This is Juan Castillo from the...
Mistake.
It's okay, it happens. I'm Juan Castillo from the Embassy of Canada, and I think my question is gonna go in that direction, and is on from the perspective of regional coalitions. Do you see this as an opportunity to open it up to non-regional partners? And I mean, for Canada, for us, it's a little bit easier because we have eastern flank and north flank, and they're connected. But then we go to the other flank, to Asia Pacific, and I'm thinking more of our Australian friends, our Kiwi friends, Japan, South Korea, and in the case of Ukraine, they have been actually very proactive in projecting and so on.
What's the question?
So the question is if those regional coalitions are actually an entry point for non-regional partners, especially the ones that are far away, but have demonstrated that they're able to contribute to efforts in relation to security and deterrence. Thank you.
I will start. Well, absolutely agree that we should include them, and the Ukraine's geographical position is that it's the natural prolongation of our region. That's why Estonia is supporting inclusion of Ukraine into NATO and EU as well. All the free world, including Australia, New Zealand, Japan, you mentioned South Korea, Canada. We appreciate you are with us, and mainly a framework nation in Latvia. They are all welcome. Plus, it also gives them opportunity to anchor themselves into this free world, because some of unpredictability. Currently, I've talked with Japanese diplomats. They are telling to us that, well, at least you are in NATO. We are there somehow alone.
But
Just briefly.
a two-finger, I don't think that European commitments to the Indo-Pacific, for example, have a lot of credibility in most cases. But I think there's one area that is underdeveloped and undertaught, that is interoperability. For example, if there is a Great Pacific War, the demand for interceptors will grow rapidly. Do we have a protocol to, for example, deliver IRIS-T or other means quickly and implement them in the Australian armed forces, the Japanese armed forces, if they need? No, but we should.
Okay, so thank you very much. Could you just provide one short sentence for our audience to take home at the other end?
Cooperation is a force multiplier, and these keywords today, standardization, interoperability, that's what keeps us running.
Sir?
Yeah, regional cooperation is a key issue, and it builds on trust, and trust is built by common exercise, experience, and practical cooperation.
Regional cooperation is not only an opportunity, it is a necessity. And countries of the region should focus on projects. I think Baltic Defense Line, including partners, maritime security, and logistics issues should be the priorities.
Well, quite complex. So thank you very much. Please, so we are almost ready for political address, so please help me to recognize our speakers. Okay, thank you.